And we wanted this luncheon just to say thank you. And without your generous support, we really would not be able to help as many people as we have. So I wanted to talk a little bit about us and the initiative. We have 3 programs. One supports other programs, like the program at Bemis Public Library, which helps immigrants in all sorts of ways, including preparing their applications for citizenship, English classes, etc. So we support other programs. And then our second program is a conversation circle that meets regularly, where people around the world can come to speak and practice talking with each other. Folks you're seeing here are some of our grantees. You can see where they come from around the world. But our major effort, as far as we know, is really unique in the United States. We're providing immigrants and refugees who are low income and in the country with documents legally, with what we call self-development grants. These are grants for things like applying for citizenship, tools for work, getting a GED, getting professional certification, we've done that, getting a green card for residency, all sorts of things that we hope lift the immigrant and his or her family. So the immigrant has to provide proof of their low-income status and show us documents showing that the government knows they're here. And our grants are not made to an individual. We don't say, here, have some money. It's made to, for example, for citizenship, it's made to the Department of Homeland Security. And we don't provide 100% of the cost usually, because we think that the immigrant should have some skin in the game. So we provide a good, healthy portion of a cost, but enough to get people so that they can apply for these things that will help them. One of our most interesting grants, in my opinion, was to a young mother from Ethiopia. She's up here somewhere. She had passed her medical exam the very first time in this country in English, which is pretty remarkable. And she needed to go to interviews for her residency, and she didn't have money to go to the interviews. So we provided money for her airfare to 2 internship interviews. She was accepted in Chicago, and she's doing wonderfully there. And there is a large Ethiopian population there, so she will be invaluable in that setting. So that was really exciting. The largest number of applications we get are for citizenship, and it's very expensive, as some of you know, to become a citizen. Homeland Security used to waive some of the fees, but due to politics and their budget, whatever, they don't do that anymore. And so a lot of people who are eligible to become citizens simply cannot afford the application costs. We've given 23 grants in the last few years. I wanted to tell you where the folks came from. They came from, here we go, Iraq, Morocco, Ghana, El Salvador, Mexico, Nicaragua, Bolivia, Peru, Venezuela, and of course Ethiopia. Most of the folks are from South America, of course, because it's adjacent to us, but they've come to us from around the world. I want to introduce Mary Siddell, who's still eating, sorry. This is one of our grantees. Mary's from Peru, and she's just going to take a minute or two to tell us about what receiving a grant from LIC for citizenship has meant to her. So please welcome Mary.
Well, yes, I'm one of those very lucky people that I got to get some money. I came to the United States in 2001 legally, but to be honest, I was like, well, I have everything, right? As a resident, why do I need to become a citizen? So, and everything was always first, and it was kind of expensive, so I kept pushing it until I saw my residency card expiring, like in less than a year. I said, oh my goodness. I had no idea these kind of organizations existed. Nobody told me, but I found out, so I contacted them. It was great. I just became a citizen probably a month and a half ago.
Wow.
I I make the decision to become a citizen, not just because my residency was expiring, but elections are coming, and I want to make sure. I want to make sure I'm voting in November, so I'm already registered and all that. So I'm very excited about it. Want to make sure democracy is in here and all that. I also want to share my passion with, not just with immigrants, with everybody. I totally believe that this world, this country have hope. I'm kind of tired of hearing people, oh, everything is bad and wrong. It's not. I think we are going to, I want to be that generation, that person that I tell people everything is going to be great. We can do it, especially to immigrants that they think because they come from a background that was harsh, they are going to have a harsh time here, and there is no way. But some people need help to get there, and I want to be that person. So thank you for having me here, and that's it, I think.
Thank you. I wanted to tell you one other little story, but thank you, Mary. And it was about, some of you know Joe Rice. He used to be our state senator. He's a wonderful guy. He was deployed in Iraq, and he called me one day and said, Susan, I've got this Iraqi family, and the man has been a translator for the American forces. And as a result, he's come under fire from the insurgents, and they have him on a list to be killed. And in fact, they had murdered his twin brother. And Joe said, these folks have to leave the country right away. They're landing at DIA, I think this was a Tuesday. They're landing at DIA on Friday. And can you meet their plane, put them in a hotel, find them an apartment, furnish the apartment, and get the man a job? After I picked myself up off the floor, well, our board jumped in, and we did. We got all that accomplished for RAD. It was great. There's Khadija from Ethiopia, who I talked about, and Rad and his family are in the pictures also. Today, he and his wife both are American citizens and doing very well. Their 3 children are in school learning English. They learned English. It's like bang, bang, bang. So they're doing just wonderfully. But at any rate, I wanted to tell you about that because Rad, after some time, we got him a job with Lisa Champ repairing cars, which is what he had done for a while in Ethiopia or in Iraq. That's the family. And so he was working for Champ, and he said to us, if I just had $300, I could buy my own tools for work instead of renting them, and I could make more per hour. And we sort of went, $300, to make a difference in somebody's life. So we went to the Optimist Club, Breakfast Optimist. They gave us a donation. We got the tools for Rad, and then he was on his way. So that was the beginning of our One Immigrant at a Time program, when we began to realize that a very small amount of money can make a big difference in some people's lives. Change your name to more accurately represent what you do, and to avoid confusion with the program at the library, which everybody was always getting mixed up. So we have a drum roll here, if we could have a drum roll. And Vanna Hoyt, and there's our new name, Immigrant Pathways Colorado. Thank you. And we have a new website too, thanks to Tracy Jones over there, and so that's our big surprise. Only our name has changed, our nonprofit status, everything else about us is still the same. But I wanted to thank Professor John Hall at Arapahoe Community College, who had worked with his students to design this new logo. Is Silvana here? One of the students was supposed to come today, but I guess she didn't make it. Okay, thank you guys. Now, finally, I'm going to stop talking, almost. It's my very real pleasure today to be able to introduce our keynote speaker, Ms. Helen Thorpe. I know everybody's been anxious to hear her. One observer who commented on Facebook has described Ms. Thorpe as a mother, a writer, a reader, and a change agent. And I thought, what a wonderful description. I also find it interesting to note that while we're talking about immigration today and immigrants, that Ms. Thorpe is an immigrant herself, having been born in London of Irish parents. So people often come all over the world. Ms. Thorpe graduated magna cum laude from Princeton University in 1989, then earned a master's degree in English literature from Columbia University. She interned at the Atlantic Monthly and has had stories published in such prominent magazines as the New York Times Magazine, the New Yorker, and Harper's Bazaar. We've asked Ms. Thorpe to talk today mostly about her book, Just Like Us, the true story of 4 Mexican girls coming of age in America. But I'm sure she would be happy to also answer questions about her second book, Soldier Girls, the battle of 3 women at home and at war. That book was declared the #1 nonfiction book of 2014 by Time Magazine, and it's being made into an HBO miniseries. So please join me in welcoming.
It's really a pleasure to be here today. I truly admire this group and what you're doing, and it's wonderful to see so many people in this room. And I feel that if you're here today, you have a really big heart and a welcoming sensibility. And I think working with immigrants today, especially in kind of the climate that we have in this country right now, and the debates that we have around this subject is just really important. I think it's one of the most important things we could be doing. And I'm biased in that regard as an immigrant myself and somebody who always identifies with other immigrants as well. Susan helped me out when I was thinking about being here today by giving me some of the things that she was curious about. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about my first book, as she has suggested. And I'll be happy to answer questions about both books afterwards. And one of the questions that she had for me was, how did you get the idea to write this book in the first place? Growing up as I did with Irish parents living in this country, but going back home to Ireland all the time in the summer to spend time with my aunts and uncles, my grandparents, my cousins, and sort of growing up with 2 countries as I did, it's very natural for me to be interested in especially people who immigrate from Mexico, because I think so many people in our community who come from Mexico, with the proximity that we have to Mexico, grow up in a way that's a little bit similar to the way that I did in terms of trying to stay connected to their family at home and trying to cross those borders and maintain a sense of family even while living in 2 countries. And the 4 girls that I got to know do represent that kind of idea that they want to be connected to their family, and their families are often split, half in this country and half in another country. And it was that idea that really captivated me at the beginning. My background, my training is in journalism. I've worked at magazines and newspapers. And so when I set about doing this idea, what I ended up doing was hanging out with these 4 young women for 6 years and going to high school classes with them, going to college classes with them, going to parties with them, going to Mexican dance halls with them here in this area, and trying to dance not very well, and hearing bands that had traveled from Mexico to be here because of our huge immigrant community. And it was truly eye-opening for me as a white person, Anglo, English-speaking, to spend that much time in the Latino community, especially the Spanish-speaking part of the Latino community. And, there were many, many things that I thought I knew about immigration because of my own family background, but there were many, many things that the young women had to teach me that were just different for them than it was for me. And of course, one of those things was their experience grappling with some of the prejudice directed toward them that I never really experienced, because I think being an Irish immigrant can be very different than their experience of growing up as Mexican American in this country. When I was spending so much time with them, one of the things I tried to do was be unobtrusive. So I I wanted to be able to write very authentically and in a very real way about what their experiences were. And to do that, I had to sort of try to make myself as small as possible and just listen as hard as I could with my whole being, and try to hear as much of what they had to say as I possibly could. But I also didn't want to like ruin their lives in the process. So, I mean, they wanted to be just high school kids, and they wanted to be just ordinary college students. And part of my job, therefore, was also like not to show up or not to have my notebook out taking notes on them while they're trying to just live their lives and experience what it meant to be at college or what it meant to be in high school. So even though I did follow them over a 6-year period of time, I tried to be mindful to show up maybe one day a week while they were at college, or when they were getting ready for their prom, which was one of the early times that we were together. I asked if it would be okay to hang out with them while they were getting dressed and getting ready for the prom, but I didn't try to go to the prom with them. I wanted them to be able to have that experience on their own. But one of the really funny things that happened was that we were at the home of one of these young women. Her name is Maricela in the book, which is a pseudonym that she chose. Her dad did want to go to the prom with her. Oh. And he felt that he should chaperone her, that she should not be allowed to go out of the house in the evening with young men and head off to a prom on her own. This seemed like a terrible idea to him, and he was certain that his ideas of fatherhood from rural Mexico would insist he must accompany her if he's going to be a good father. And she was very busy trying to explain to him, Dad, that is not the way it happens in America. Dads, you'll be the only dad at the prom. Nobody else is bringing their dad. And it was, this dialogue. At the same time, she was trying to sort of get there with her date, and this is how the book ended up opening, is with this scene of her trying to get to the prom in the way that she wants, and her negotiating, being both American but also coming from a family that's from Mexico, and having these two cultural traditions that she's trying to handle at the same time. As I got to know the families over time, some of the things that I had to learn, or some of the things that surprised me that I didn't fully understand, that I think many people in this room probably, if you're working in this community, maybe you have learned as well, have to do with things like the different levels of education. So in Maricela's family, her mother was taken out of school after 2nd grade growing up in Mexico, and this was because she was needed to help out in the fields picking crops, and also cleaning the house and cooking. And her father was taken out of school after 5th grade. He stopped school after 5th grade. So her father could read and write. Her mother could not. And she was growing up here in Denver as a straight-A student at a Denver high school, and was identified by the staff in the high school as college material. She's very, very smart. She was getting straight A's in AP classes. She had started out in English language acquisition classes in elementary school, but by high school had transitioned to full AP classes and was doing very, very well in school. And college recruiters were coming and talking to her. The young women in the book were split in terms of their legal status. They're 4 very close friends, all in AP classes by high school, but 2 had social security numbers and legal status, 2 did not. And Maricela was one of the girls who did not have legal status. So when a college recruiter would try to recruit her, she wound up having to explain, I'm not here legally. My parents brought me to this country without a social security number. I don't know how to pay for college. I can't fill out the FAFSA. I don't qualify for a Pell Grant. I can't get certain scholarships like the Daniels Fund scholarship that my friend just won. I don't qualify. How would I pay for your college that you want me to go to? And she felt very ashamed of having to recount this. It was very hard for her emotionally to discuss with a stranger, that somebody she didn't know. She often didn't feel safe disclosing this information about her family, and sometimes she did choose to share all of that. Sometimes she wasn't comfortable sharing all of that. And the young women had decided that they would share their story fully with me if I agreed to change their names and give them pseudonyms, because they wanted more people to understand the burden that they were living with. I feel like this microphone started making noise. Hopefully it's not bothering you guys. I don't know what to do to...
I'm not sure what to do.
Maybe I'll just move this. I don't know if that will help.
Yeah.
A little bit. Okay. All right. Let's try that. So, sorry. They really wanted to share their story with a journalist because they felt that while the question of whether they and their families should be in this country was a subject of huge debate, they did not feel their story was well understood. They didn't think immigration laws were well understood, so there was a debate, but people were saying things that indicated that maybe they didn't understand the law. For example, people would say, why don't they go get their papers? Why are they so lazy that they won't go fill out the right forms? And if you understand immigration law, you know there's no paper they could fill out, there's no form they could fill out that would allow them to change their immigration status while they're on U.S. soil if they entered the country illegally in the first place. Today, a student can apply for deferred action or DACA, but at that point in time, DACA did not exist. And so there wasn't even the option for one of the children to qualify for that exemption. So given that there was no way for them to change their legal status, they found the debate strange when people would say, why don't they change their legal status? And they just wanted people to understand really truly how stuck they felt and what the real choice before them was, which was to either remain in this country with the jobs they had found and the income they were earning with this second-class status and living an illegal life or an undocumented life, or give up those jobs, give up that income, and return to Mexico to apply for legal status from their country of origin, because there was no way to apply for legal status while on U.S. soil. And that was a very hard choice for those families, because the income they had here was significant, and the parents never felt that it was worth giving up the income they had to go back to try to enter the country the right way. They didn't feel they could do without the money they were earning, and consequently their children were finishing high school, unable to work legally, unable to drive legally, and unable to figure out how to pay for college. And that was the dilemma that I really wanted to write about, that I wanted to bring to life in a way where a reader could empathize and understand how a young person might find herself in this predicament, getting ready for a senior prom, friends going to college, unable to figure out how to pay for college herself, knowing she's smart, but really stuck and not seeing a path forward to the kind of future that she was hoping for herself, and wondering what to do. And if you want to find out what happens, you have to read the book. Another question that Susan had for me was around the talent that these young women represented, and this idea of how do we as a country use the resources of our young people. And I really did feel the book that I wrote is a nonfiction book that reads like a novel. There's not a political argument in the book. I don't feel immigration is an easy subject. I think it's a very tough policy dilemma. So there's no moment where I say, and people who think this way are good people, and people who think this way are bad people. In fact, I actually go out of my way to represent all points of view. Spent quite a bit of time with Tom Tancredo understanding his point of view and representing his point of view in the book, because the young women do intersect with him at a certain point and go hear him speak. And so their point of view is represented, his point of view is represented, really a breadth of opinion is represented in the course of just telling their personal story. And I don't tell the reader what to think, although I'm clearly sympathetic to these young women. But my personal opinion is, if we could wave a magic wand, we would never create a situation where we have young people growing up in our community who were by law obliged to educate K through 12. We must offer them a K through 12 education. That's gone all the way to the Supreme Court, whether they're documented or not. Depriving a child of an education is considered such a terrible thing that we feel we must educate every child growing up on U.S. soil, regardless of legal status. So we would never think it was a good idea to decide we must educate all of these young people, and then suddenly, in their teenage years, tell some of them, and there's no place for you in our society. Why would we choose to put our resources into these young people for a certain amount of time and then say, but you can't participate in society? It's not, it doesn't make sense to me to set things up that way. So I really have celebrated personally, again, this isn't in the book, but personally I celebrated when deferred action DACA was passed, because it did give those young people brought here when they were minors, not able to make a legal decision on their own, it did give them a path to work legally, and it did give them a sort of a way forward. I don't see it as a full solution, though, because somebody like Maricella's friend Yadira, who I wrote about in my book, who like Maricela, did not have legal status. She today has gone on to qualify for DACA. Getting DACA is so hard. She had to prove she was in the United States continuously from the moment when her mother brought her here at age 3 to age 27 when she applied. She had to have a piece of paper to show she was in the United States continuously all of that time. Thankfully, although her mother was single, monolingual Spanish speaker, no legal status, had been homeless for periods of time, lived in dire poverty, her mother had kept in a suitcase every report card, every award, every rental agreement, every Head Start document, early Head Start document. She had every piece of paper this young woman had ever acquired in her entire life in a suitcase, and kept that suitcase with them through umpteen moves, and homeless shelters and other types of living situations. So she was able to qualify for DACA, but she can't vote. She can't easily leave the country to visit her relatives, her family members in Mexico, and return and re-enter this country without trying to obtain very special permission to do so. DACA can be taken away by a future administration. She does not have a permanent place in our society. So we still haven't really welcomed her, despite all of our investments in her as taxpayers who fund public education. And she is a young person who has gone through our school system, gotten stellar grades, done everything right, graduated from the University of Denver, and now has a wonderful job using her professional degree, thanks to DACA, who really is contributing, giving back to our society, and would be considered really leadership material by probably anybody in this room. So I hope someday we can figure out how to really properly make her part of our country and part of our society. That would be my personal wish. I'll stop there, and I'm happy to answer any questions about that book or the book about the 3 female veterans that I wrote subsequently. Yeah, in the back of the room. It's my phone, I
Are
think that's
there
the
other family members at risk?
I think you asked, are there other families at risk? Other family, sorry.
When you apply for student applies for DACA,
Yeah.
is the rest of their family now flagged as illegal? And
When the student applies for DACA, is the rest of their family flagged as illegal and therefore at risk?
or at risk?
Certainly the young women that I know worried about things like that. I don't feel equipped to fully answer that question. I'm not an immigration attorney. I believe that the students that I know feel that they did take a risk, and that they were taking a risk not only on their own behalf but on the part of their parents when they applied for DACA. But most of the students that I know went ahead and applied for DACA anyway because they wanted so badly to be able to work legally. They just wanted to be able to take a job and not have all of the complications of not having legal permission to work. Yes?
Did most of them, did they say if the families found jobs right away when they came to the U.S.? What kind of jobs? Were they like farm jobs, construction jobs, or did they comment on it?
The question is, did the students share with me whether their parents found jobs and what kind of jobs did they find? The book that I wrote is incredibly detailed, I guess I would say, and it's a very full portrait of these families, and you hear where all of the parents worked, what they made per hour, how they managed to get those jobs, what documents they did provide to their employers, and how they described their own legal status to their employers. And you see all the different ways that somebody who's here without documents and without legal permission manages nonetheless to be part of our economy. And I think that's a fascinating part of the book, to read how does it work when you're not legal? How do you get a job? Who hires you? What's the conversation like when it comes to, do you have a social security number? What do you say? And I go into detail about all of that, including a description of Maricella's parents taking Maricela at age 13 to a place where they could obtain black market fake documents for her that would say she was 18, that would say she was legal when she was not legal, that would allow her to start working at age 13 at a King Soopers grocery store to help support their family, which she did the whole time she was in high school. Yes?
How do you find these ladies, or do they find you?
Yeah. The question is, how did I find these young women, or did they find me? I was, at the beginning of the project, there was a period of time where I knew I wanted to write about undocumented students, but I didn't know which students to write about. And in fact, I wrote about a young man who was then at DCIS and the Denver School for International Studies, and was an ROTC student, and carried the U.S. flag in his ROTC unit, but didn't have legal status himself. And then a friend of a friend in the education field who was aware of these young women introduced me, and I would say I was looking for them, but also they were looking for me. They were in the middle of looking for an avenue. How could they tell their stories? They were already fairly politically savvy. They had become activists already themselves, and they were really looking for a way to have their story represented. And I think they were willing to take more risks than some other students that I met. As a result, they had found mentors. They had some political activists working in the Latino community had recruited them to help register voters in the Spanish-speaking community, and they were already going door to door registering people to vote, though they themselves, two of them, didn't have legal status and wouldn't be able to vote when they turned 18. But they were already politically active anyway. And I then spoke with them and their mentors. Their parents were extremely trusting and did not have a lot of questions of me, but their mentors served almost in a parental role in terms of this project, asking how I was going to protect them. Was I putting them at risk by trying to write about them? Would I offer them pseudonyms? And all those questions really came from their mentors. So we found each other, in the center of the room.
Yeah, when I was reading your book, I was imagining you going out with these young women, and money is always such an issue, and they always have needs, you know. You may not want to answer this, but did you ever break down and buy them a shirt of Gap or something like that?
I'm happy to answer that question. Money is always an issue and was always an issue for them. But because I had been a journalist for 15 or 20 years before this project began, I really understood the rules of journalism, which are that you cannot pay your subjects, nor can you in any way exchange money, even under those kinds of circumstances. So I knew I could not pay their entrance fee if we were going somewhere together. I could not buy them clothing at the Gap or do any of those things that you mentioned as illustrations of what I might want to do, because I know I have more resources than they do, and they are participating in a project where I'm earning money from their story, their life story. So I might even feel like they deserve or should be compensated. I cannot compensate them. I know that just from all the years of journalism, and when I was speaking with the editor that I worked with, that was one of the first questions he had for me. Did you ever pay them any money? Did you ever promise to pay them any money? Has there been any kind of exchange? And I had to be able to say, no, I completely understand that I cannot do that as a journalist. It's a hard rule to follow, but it's an excruciatingly hard rule to follow as you start writing about more vulnerable people or people living in poverty. It's terrifically difficult. And I think there's a huge moral dilemma there when a journalist is profiting off of the story of the person who is much more vulnerable and has much less income. But I had to choose. I felt either I could financially compensate them or I could write about their stories. I couldn't do both, and I chose the story. Right here and then over here, yeah.
Did their friendship sustain to this day?
Did their friendships with each other
Yes.
sustain to this day? Yes, one of the four young women has kind of drifted away. They would say they're still friends, but they don't communicate very often. And then three have remained just as close as always. Maricela, Yadira, and Clara are still very close. Yeah.
You spend a tremendous amount of time on Just Like Us, in interviews and so on. I wondered if Soldier Girls took an equal amount of time.
I spent 6 years on the first book, Just Like Us, the one I've been describing today. And I spent 4 years on the second book. The second book describes women in the Indiana National Guard who enlisted before 9/11 and really never intended or never foresaw overseas deployments. The three women are they're generationally, they represent kind of three different generations. And they became very close during their deployments. There's a young woman who enlists, although she's left-leaning, has just voted for Ralph Nader, describes herself as a pot-smoking hippie. She enlists for college tuition benefits in March 2001. And then that September, when she's in training, 9/11 happened. When she goes to Afghanistan, she becomes very close friends with another woman who is a single mother with 3 children, who really enlisted both for financial reasons and also as an opportunity to prove herself after dropping out of high school and having children very young. And then the third woman that they become very close with is a woman who's in her 50s, who was one of the first women to integrate their guard unit back when it had been all male, and she became a grandmother during that deployment. So that I met those 3 veterans when they had finished their deployments. I met them in 2010, and I was writing about the preceding decade from 9/11 through the moment when I met them. And we did 4 years of interviews to reconstruct what their deployments had been like, and then how hard it was for them to come home. One returns with some injuries and post-traumatic stress, and for her, reintegration back home was very difficult. And the book ultimately is about that. How do you come back home from an experience like the one that she had? Any other questions? I'm going to, oh yes, right here. Hablo español solamente un poquito. Estudié por muchos años, pero mi español no es muy bien. Just a little bit. Not much, not enough. But the young women in Just Like Us were fluent in English by the time I met them. It was their parents that I had difficulty communicating with. So, you know, I could get by, I could understand later to do a proper interview. Yeah, right here and then here.
Are you currently working on another book?
I am working on another book. You're asking at just the right time. I have a terrible time starting projects. It's really hard for me to find the next thing. So after several years of trying to figure out what to write about, I have started writing about refugees, and I'm following the experiences of a couple different families who have resettled here in Colorado. And I'm in their classroom looking at English language acquisition instruction, and then also getting to know their parents. One family's from Iraq, and just a similar story, working with the U.S. military and then targeted after that. And another family's from the Congo. And I'm delighted to have met them, and I think their stories are really amazing. There's another question?
He asked the question.
Oh, okay, well, perfect. That's the right question to end on, probably. Thank you.
Today is a time of firsts for our Immigrant Pathways Colorado. We're also establishing an award, a very special award for someone who has contributed to cultural understanding. And I'd like to say that today this award goes to a person who has put a human face on the lives of immigrants in the United States today. And Petula has a very appropriate quote that I think she'd like to read.
So this quote is from Paulo Coelho. Some of you may have heard it. Connie and I both found it together. Culture makes people understand each other better. And if they understand each other better in their soul, it is easier to overcome the economic and political barriers. But first, they have to understand that their neighbor is, in the end, just like them, with the same problems, the same questions. And so on behalf of the Immigrant Pathways Colorado, we would like to present for exceptional contributions to cultural awareness and understanding, the Cultural Pathways Award to Helen Thorpe.
Thank you again for coming. That was wonderful, Helen. Thank you. Thank you again for coming, for being a friend of Immigrant Pathways Colorado.